The entity on deck. Leo and Maya called it the Dead Field, a massive, fallow stretch of land bordered by a dense, suffocating wood and a crumbling observatory. It was their place of solitude, and on this late October night, it was their place of total, absolute silence. That silence shattered at 11:37 p.m. It wasn't a sound so much as a pressure, a deep, resonating hum that vibrated in their teeth and settled in their chests like chilled lead. They looked up, not at the sound, but at the light, a pulsating emerald glare that pierced the low cloud cover. The light didn't move like a plane or satellite. It simply descended, cutting a massive, silent shadow across the field until it vanished behind the ridge. That, Leo whispered, his voice tight, is not a helicopter. They followed the hum to the edge of the wood. The air here was heavy, cold, and smelled metallic, like ozone mixed with stale rain and something else, something intensely biochemical. Peering through the pine needles, they saw it, a ship, black and seamless, resting on the earth. It wasn't saucer-shaped, it was a rough, angular tear in reality, built of sharp angles that seemed to swallow the moonlight. A section of the hull shimmered and then dissolved, forming a hatch. "Stay here," Leo said, not waiting for Maya's objection before ducking into the gap. Inside, the light was sickly blue, and the metallic cold was overwhelming. The air felt thin, painful. He only took 3 steps before stopping. Lying near a panel dripping with a viscous, clear fluid, was the alien. It was slight, hunched, and covered in a chitinous gray armor. It wasn't the large, terrifying monster they expected. It looked like a victim. Its eyes, vast and obsidian, stared not at Leo, but straight up, fixed on something Leo couldn't see. A thin, reedy sound, somewhere between a sigh and a whistle, came from its mouth. Maya crept up behind Leo. As soon as she saw the creature, she stopped breathing. They stood frozen, the blue light making their shadows long and unstable. The alien shifted. One of its 3-fingered hands lifted, struggling, until it pointed one sharp, trembling digit toward the far, darkened end of the cargo deck. Then, a voice, not auditory, but a clear, panicked thought, slammed into their minds. It felt like being submerged in freezing water while being told a secret you desperately didn't want to hear. Not safe. On deck. The alien shuddered, its obsidian eyes blinking slowly, desperately. It strained, pushing another raw, panicked transmission into their consciousness. A vivid, sickening image of a massive, shadowed figure with unnaturally long limbs, moving with a scraping sound across a bulkhead. The figure had no discernible face, just a vast, consuming darkness that radiated hunger. Helper was brought. It is the shadow. It is the demon. Escape. The alien's hand dropped. The sickly blue light flickered once, plunging the ship into complete darkness, leaving Leo and Maya alone with the deafening hum, the metallic smell, and the knowledge that something enormous, something not built of steel or flesh, was now moving toward them down the dark corridor. They were no longer the only life forms on the ship, and the thing that shared the deck was not interested in conversation.
The entity on deck. Part 2. The key to the Emerald Eye. The darkness was absolute, total, and deafening. The omnipresent hum that had drawn Leo and Maya to the ship died instantly, replaced by the profound, isolating silence of the void. In that void, the only sound was the ragged, amplified sound of their own terror. The scream caught in Maya's throat and the sickening, rhythmic thump of Leo's frantic heart. Then, the floor vanished. Without a groan or a tremor, the vessel's artificial gravity cut out. Maya screamed again, this time audibly, as the floor rushed away from her feet and she hit the ceiling hard. Leo, too, tumbled in the zero-G, his sudden loss of control adding a physical dimension to the cosmic dread. They were no longer standing on a floor, they were floating, utterly insignificant specks in an invisible, metallic cube. The alien's last, fractured thought echoed in their minds, burning through the silence. Gravity. Core, offline, key, 2, I, at, nav, deck, OR, it, sinks, all. They understood. The creature they had just seen, the demon, the shadow, was aboard, and they couldn't run if they couldn't stand. They needed the key to the Emerald Eye to restore the core and activate the ship's escape sequence. Nav deck, Leo gasped, pushing off a bulkhead, propelling himself clumsily toward the shimmering hatch they'd used for entry. But the dark corridor was already closing. The scraping presence. The sound started, not a voice, not a roar, but a dry, horrifying scraping noise, like vast, unpolished bone dragged across oxidized metal. It was coming from the direction the alien had pointed. Maya fumbled for purchase on a loose, hanging wire, her eyes wide as saucers, trying to peer into the inky blackness. The air around the opening of the long hallway ahead began to distort, not visually, but psychologically. She felt the sudden, crushing vastness and insignificance, the cosmic truth that the entity moving toward them was not merely a physical life form, but a corrupted power that belonged to the cold, silent truth between the stars. This isn't a demon, she thought, the realization colder than the ship's air. It's a spirit twisted by the void, a cosmic devoevery, something that feeds on the absence of light and life. It was the destructive side of the ancient vile I Vode, fairies and waters, folklore, mutated into the ultimate predator. Leo, go, up, she yelled, realizing the threat would have no sound barriers in 0G. Leo spotted a service ladder leading into a ventilation shaft above the cargo deck. He pushed, scrambling into the shaft, the thin metal edges grating against his clothing. Maya followed, propelled by pure adrenaline. The scraping noise stopped directly beneath them. The entity on deck. Part 3. The price of gravity and the divergence. They reached the nav deck, a small, circular room with a single primary console. The console was dark, but a small, recessed port glowed with a dull, intermittent green. Leo lunged, found the black, jagged piece of solidified glass, the emerald key, in the alcove, and jammed it into the port. The sudden, brutal slam of gravity, a force they had longed for moments ago, was now their enemy. The shadow entity, caught mid-float, hit the floor of the nav deck with a wet, heavy thud. The scraping noise intensified as its unnaturally long limbs struggled against the sudden weight. The green light of the emerald eye port flared into a blinding, rhythmic pulse, and the console exploded into a frantic array of crimson warning lights. A new, high-pitched, shrill, incessant alarm began to hammer against their eardrums. On the main screen, a single line of text flashed in urgent yellow. Power relay stability critical. Escape hatch lockdown. T 60 seconds to core overload. The gravity core restart overloaded the main relays. Leo screamed over the shriek. It locked the ship down. We have 60 seconds before this deck is fried, and the hatch is fused shut forever. The shadow entity had adapted. Its limbs snapped like iron cables, shattering the primary console. Split up, Maya yelled. I can hold it here, but I can't restart the relays. The gravitational gridlock. Engineering deck. Leo shouted. I need to dump the excess power before it cycles down to life support failure. Leo took off, throwing himself down the service ladder. He entered the cargo deck, a massive, pitch-black hangar where the gravity field was wildly fluctuating. 1 second he was heavy, the next he was floating, caught in a sickening pocket of pure gravitational horror. He reached the engineering door, finding a lock sealed by a pressure differential required indicator flickering wildly with the unstable gravity. Behind him, Maya faced the entity alone. It drifted slowly, purposefully, its entire form radiating a silent, suffocating hunger. Instinctively, she raised the emerald key. The jagged stone, still radiating the blinding green pulse, was the only source of light opposing the entity's absolute darkness. The shadow entity hesitated. The green light was painful to it. A point of pure, concentrated, earthly, ancient belief that resisted its corrupted cosmic form. It let out a soundless psychic scream that hit Maya with the force of a battering ram, overloading her senses with images of memory and identity erasure. Clutching the stone, Maya bought Leo precious seconds. She slammed her foot down on the still-functioning emergency seal button for the nav deck. A heavy metal door hissed down, plunging her into darkness with the predator, sealing herself in an isolated cell. The entity on deck. Part 4. The Stone Story Conclusion. T-20 seconds. Leo was wrestling a defunct energy cell toward the engineering door sensor pad. He had to hit a perfect 1.000 G unit weight balance between the fluctuating gravity and the heavy cell. His skin was slick with sweat as the pressure tripled, forcing him to strain, and then vanished, sending him floating inches from his goal. T-10 seconds. Come on, he grunted. He managed one final shove as the gravity briefly stabilized at 0.4 G. The cell slammed onto the pad, the added weight perfectly compensating for the low field. The readout flashed green, 1.000 G units achieved. The engineering door seal released with a deep clunk. Leo didn't wait, plunging into the maintenance bay. He found the main relay terminal, a sparking, smoking console. Following the alien's frantic instructions, he yanked 3 brightly colored, braided cables, red, yellow, blue, and plunged them into the emergency dump port. The shriek of the alarm died. The sickening crimson lights vanished. The ship settled into a cool, quiet hum of stability. The true shadow. Leo sprinted back toward the nav deck, praying the hatch was functional. He reached the heavy metal door just as the seal indicator blinked green. Hatch unlocked. He wrenched the door open. The scene inside froze his heart. Maya was pressed against the far wall, the emerald key held out like a crucifix. The shadow entity was no more than 5 feet away, no longer scraping, but slowly, fluidly absorbing the air around the edges of the key. The psychic torment was visible on Maya's face, her eyes squeezed shut, silently enduring the assault. "Leo, it's not a demon," Maya whispered, her voice raw. "It's the space itself. It's what happens when the void gets too old. It's the Kamina Prika of the cosmos, eternal, unfeeling, and utterly empty." She realized the truth of the entity, the missing piece of the cosmic puzzle. The shadow entity was the personification of absolute, indifferent existence. It wasn't alive, it was the gravitational horror and the vastness of space given hunger. The emerald key, a piece of volcanic glass imbued with millennia of earthly folklore, culture, and belief, was the ultimate counter. It was a fragment of the elemental soul itself, a concentration of life and story, which the void could not tolerate. "Now," Leo shouted. He smashed a nearby fire extinguisher against a blinking external viewport. The viewport instantly spider-webbed, triggering the automated escape sequence. A separate, small hatch near the floor flashed green. The escape hatch lockdown was finally disabled. Maya dropped the key to the floor. The shadow entity lunged, its limbs coalescing into a single, massive wave of darkness. Leo grabbed Maya, dragging her by the collar, and threw himself through the escape hatch just as the shadow slammed into the nav deck wall. A terrible, booming compression noise followed, signaling the full failure of the ship's hull. The escape pod's exterior camera showed the alien vessel collapsing inward, consumed by the same void it had drifted through for centuries. Leo clutched the emerald key, their talisman, their physical connection to home and the ancient strength of their ancestors, as the small pod shot away from the ruins, leaving the vast, silent terror of the empty blackness behind. The only thing they had carried out of the dead ship was a single, glowing stone.